Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lab 5, Part 2, How to Write a Lab Report. Um, Pretty self-explanatory based on the title, but hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions in this, any questions you might have about writing a lab report. So we're just gonna hop right in. So as a reminder, the lab report is due Tuesday, November 3rd, by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. If you need an extension, just let me know. We can work something out. Report guidelines are on Blackboard. The submission link is on Blackboard. It's under lab content, lab submissions. I put it in red font so it sticks out. That submission link also has like the guidelines. It has the rubric. It's got like everything you need to write the report. Um, I'm hoping to grade and return the report by November 17th. I know we're getting like way ahead of ourselves. I just wanted to let you all know when to expect to get it back. Um, Ideally, I don't know how long it's going to take to grade them, but that's my hope for right now. And I'm going to be using that grading rubric that's on Blackboard, like verbatim. So look at that when you're writing the report. Make sure that you can like check off all the boxes on that because that's what I'm going to be using. So I'd love it if you could all watch this YouTube video on how to write a report. It's on Perusal, the link. I'm also going to upload the PowerPoint to Blackboard, so you might just be able to like click this link. The video, I don't like the way the video is made. It's like pretty, I don't know, kitsy, but it's got good content. So just try to ignore the music. I would put it on mute, otherwise it's really annoying. But it does give you a good idea of how to write a lab report. Hopefully I can do the same. So this little graphic just kind of shows like the flow of what a lab report should look like. Where you open up your paper, you talk about how there's a gap in the knowledge for that certain topic. You say what you did to fill that gap, and then you talk about the resolution or like the solution. So that's like without formal terms, that's like what a lab report is. But in formal terms, it's you have an introduction where you introduce your relevant literature and explain why your study is novel. And then you talk about your materials and methods, where you talk about how you researched it. You talked about like all the things that you did to run this study, so that anyone who's reading it could replicate it if they wanted to. And then you talk about your results. You objectively state what you found. You don't do any inferences or any analysis. You just say what you found using statistics. And then you move on to your discussion, where this is where you interpret and analyze your results. And you provide some context around them as to what they really mean. You tie it back to the literature, talk about how this answers the knowledge gap, and then you move on to your conclusions and implications, where you talk about what this means for the greater world and field. So, brief overview of a lab report, which again, this continuation, I just went through all of this, so I'm gonna skim through it. The first thing that you should probably do is analyze the data that you want to talk about in SPSS. That way you have an idea of what it looks like. I want to say that in the real world, that's not how writing a lab report goes. Like you come up with your hypothesis and all this stuff before you analyze the data. But for our purposes, you want to know like what it looks like before you start doing research for articles and whatnot. So I would start in SPSS and figure out what you want to look at before you start diving into anything else. As a reminder, we're using that data is, or what is it? Pain as we're using the data set that's pain as social glue, which we were in for lab before, so it should look familiar. So the two parts on here that we didn't discuss in the last slide, this slide, was the abstract and the references. So the abstract, which you've probably read a bunch of abstracts in your academic careers, and it's like a little like 100 to 250 word summary. Oh, I have to sneeze. Hold on. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button in time. I don't know how to edit this out after, so you're just gonna have to live with that. So the abstract is like a 100 to 250 word summary of the article. Should contain, it can contain a bunch of different things, but you should be able to read it and get a sense of what the article is talking about and hopefully what the findings are. So you just want to write one of those. I would highly suggest looking at the way other abstracts do theirs. Even the abstract for the article, the pain is a social glue article. I love writing the abstract because then I like writing that first, because then I kind of like base how I write a report off of that to make sure I like hit all the important parts. And then the references, it's just APA references. I'm going to tell you this 100 times. I would look at the Purdue OWL website on how to do this. And I would also make sure that when you're finding your sources for your lit review, there's almost always a cite button on the article that you're on, and it will give you the APA citation. So take advantage of that. So let's see, the grading rubric. Broadly, I would really suggest that you read through it. But broadly, it's graded out of 100 points, and then will be converted to 50 points, not 25. So sorry about that. That's an error. It will be graded. It'll be converted to 50 points. So the rubric is 20 points out of 100 for the introduction, 15 out of 100 for the methods, 20 out of 100 for results, 25 out of 100 for discussion, and then writing style is 20 points. So that's writing style is just like grammar, APA style, and then your references. Great. So the introduction was already talked about a bit in the lit review, or how to conduct a literature search video and slides, because the literature search is like 85% of your introduction. So I'm not going to go over it too much. If you have any questions, just holler at me. But I would look at the previous slides and video that I put up. So the method section is broken into 3 parts. For this lab report, the participant section is like the only thing that you can really do fully on your own, because we're using a study that's already been made. The painful experience, it's the one we're using, perfect. So you always want to begin with the total number of participants, and then you want to discuss the gender breakdown and the age of participants. So you find that information via SPSS. If you just do descriptive statistics and you do the frequency table, or means, and you can find the mean of the age, standard deviation, you can find the frequency and the percent, and it's all really important when you want to write up a little breakdown such as this. 70% of the sample was female, n equals 38, and 30% was male, n equals 16. The average age was 22. Standard deviation is 2.52. Now the only thing missing, if you know your APA style, is that this should be italicized and these should be italicized. Also, this font should be Times New Roman. Apologies for the weird font. So the other section in the method section, well, there's 2 more, is the material/measures section. So you want to talk about the questionnaires, assessments, or equipment that were used in your study, and you want to name and describe each one. So these are just random examples of equipment that you want to like touch on. If you use like a cortisol kit, a phlebotomy kit, an fMRI machine, an EMR kit, I think that's the brain one, or EKG is another one, stuff like that. You don't want to put something like, I used SPSS on my MacBook. No one cares about that. You could mention SPSS if you wanted, but you don't say like, I used my laptop, or I was using the desktop in my psychology stats lab. Like, you don't have to do any of that. It's just like something that's like out of the ordinary, or like a specialized piece of equipment that you used, like an fMRI machine, something like that. Again, for this lab report, you don't know, like you can't like make up materials and measures. It was a study that was already done. So look in the method section of the pain study and use whatever material/measures they used. And the same thing goes along for the procedure. The procedure should be pretty self-explanatory. It's like the step-by-step, the steps that they took in order to conduct the study. And it should be in enough detail that someone who's reading it can reproduce the study. They can go and run it on their own if they were to have all the materials and whatnot. So again, just take what is said in the pain is a social glue article. Don't just copy paste it. just put a summary of their procedure section. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. The results section is where you're just stating the results without much inference or discussion on them. So you want to talk about what test you used. So, we've done a lot of tests. We've done t-tests, correlation tests. By the time you watch this, we will have done chi-square tests, whole bunch of things you can do. ANOVAs, so fun. So you want to state the test, and a little example would be like if you did a t-test, which is probably what you're going to end up running. Hint, hint for your lab report. You would say, we use an independent samples t-test to examine whether there were gender differences and how much individuals like to cook. An individual samples t-test compares whether two groups are significantly different. So this part here, I don't like. Sorry for leaving it in there. I feel like I've told you this before that other people make these slides. The independent samples t-test compares whether two groups are significantly different. Please don't put that in there. That's stupid. You don't need to explain what the test does. Just say what test you used. Because people who are reading it, most likely, if they're reading the results section, they already know what these tests are. A lot of people just skim the results and go to the discussion because they don't care what test you run. For our purposes, let's assume that everybody knows what these tests mean. I'm not going to dock you if you put this line, an independent samples t-test compares whether two groups are significantly different, because it's in these slides, but I would highly, highly recommend not to do that. And in your professional career, not to put in sentences like this. That being said, the first sentence is really good, and that's how you should put it. I'm not going to read the correlation one. You can read that on your own. So in order to come up with a sentence to describe your independent samples t-test and what the test is, you need to run the analysis, and you need to know how to read these analyses. So we've gone over this. You want to take the t-value, the degrees of freedom, the significance, and you want to put in a little nice APA sentence. So you would say, like, we use an independent samples t-test to examine whether there were gender differences and how much individuals like to cook. It was found that the difference between male and female's like of cooking was not statistically significant, and then you put the t-test. What a good 2 sentences right there that describe your results succinctly. So great. Now you also want to probably restate your descriptives. And then you can say, if the results, you can say like, oh, the hypothesis was, it was found not to be significant, so we would reject the null hypothesis. That's about as much as you want to say. Or it's found significant, so we reject, non-significant, so we retain. You don't want to go into deeper analysis, just kind of want to state that. For this purposes, because you're not running a lot, your results section should probably be pretty short. I don't expect it to be very long because you're only running likely one test. Again, another hint. It doesn't need to be like super long to be good. This is just if you ran a correlation. I don't think you'll be running a correlation for this lab report, but if you ever wanted to, this is how you would write it up. So after your results comes the discussion section. In the discussion section, you review the aim of your study. You talk about, what did you find? Was your hypothesis supported? So if you were doing the gender cooking thing, you would say, restate and say like, oh, the results show that there is no significant difference between genders with cooking. You don't have to put the value of the t-test. And then you would say, this does not support our hypothesis that there is a difference. And then you would move on to the, how does your finding fit with the previous research you discussed in the introduction? You would say, previous research found that there was significant difference in people who like to cook like certain meals. We wanted to know how they like to cook all meals and found that it wasn't. Further research may need to be done in order to, determine the actual differences. You can talk about why you think it wasn't supported. You might say, oh, well, a limitation. See, sometimes if your hypothesis is not supported, the limitation really goes hand in hand here. So you could say, I don't think our hypothesis was supported because, insert something about gender differences, and then you can say also, there were only 20 females, but like 75 males. So the limitation is that like the distribution of the sample was not very even for across gender, something like that. I'm making stuff up, but those are types of limitations, is like the sample size was small, or it wasn't very diverse, or your measures weren't very good, or natural disaster happened, anything that might affect the study. Strengths would be, we have a big sample size, we used really good measures, it was very diverse, things like that. New question raised by your study that could be investigated in a future research study. Typically, that only comes up when your results are significant. Like, oh, wow, we found that there is a gender difference. Now we want to know if there's a gender difference across cultures, or across race and ethnicity. That could be a new question. Now, you could also find a new question if you didn't find significant results, like, oh, we found that cooking isn't significant across genders, but I wonder if cooking certain meals is different across genders, like that, like it wasn't for all meals, it may be for some meals, something like that. You just want to talk about one new question, because you always want to talk about implications for future research. So a new question is an implication, because you always want to finish with like, oh, in the future we can do this. That's really important professionally, because you're basically saying like, hey, give me more money and I'll do more research. For our purposes, it's just part of the job. So you just kind of have to write it for this report. But implications can be anything. Anything that you're wondering, like if you read your conclusion and you're like, oh, I wonder about this, toss it in. That's an implication for future research. That usually wraps up your paper. And then you move on to your references. So your reference should always be on a new page. You want to label it references. That's centered at the top of the page. I have an example of a sample lab report that talks all about APA formatting, so look at that. So you want to, all lines on the first line of each entry in your reference list should be indented 1/2 inch from the left margin. This is called a hanging indentation. Again, look at the sample. I think rule of thumb is 1/2 inch or 5 spaces. So you would hit enter and then do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the space bar. I'm not going to count as long as it just looks correct. And again, please use this link. Please, it's so good. Purdue OWL does a great job. It's alphabetical order too. That's a big thing. It should be alphabetical in order based on the author, the first author. So there are some additional resources, which I feel like I've already discussed, but just check out Blackboard and Perusall for more resources on how to write the lab report. There's a video, which again, please mute it. There's sample report, there's a grading rubric, all that jazz. So just ask me any questions that you might have about the writing process. You can email me if you want. You can, I would suggest using Perusall so that your classmates can see your questions too, or can see my answers. If you have more questions, you can meet with me in my office hours, which are Tuesdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You make an appointment by going to Blackboard and then office hours, and then you scroll down to where you find me, and then you choose whatever time window. If you can't make those times, just reach out. I mean, I don't know. I feel like we're all pretty busy, but we can find some time to meet. Like I have time on the weekends or at night. Like I understand. I'm a student too, so like times are crazy. But like if the 2 to 4 window doesn't work and you really want to meet, we can make it happen. So just let me know. I think that's all I have here. But I want to stress again, like please don't stress out over this report. I know you all can do it. Been paying attention to lab, you've been doing good work, you've been watching the videos. It's your first lab report, so I know it's going to be annoying and kind of tough, but the rubric should help. These resources can help. Please use me as a resource. And yeah, just like don't stress too much about it. We'll all get through it, and I'm sure you'll all do great. Can't wait to read them. Okay, I'm ending this recording, I think. And I'll see you all the 19th. I think that's what this one's for. Yeah. All right. See you later.